was, I think, living in Germany or France, Germany or France. It's a wonderfully exciting novel. It is based, again, I would ask you, how many people have you have actually read Kafka's Trial here? Have you read the trial? You've read the trial, okay. That's great, that's very, very encouraging. At least one person's read the trial. Have you read The Invitation to a Beheading? You have. And Ben Sinister? No, you haven't. Well, do read Ben, it's a magnificent novel. Invitation to a Beheading, sorry, can I just ask what the time is? We shouldn't sort of run beyond our time. 11:30. Okay, Abhi, there's time. Invitation to a Beheading is a story which is based on the trial. It's about a man called Cincinnatus in a fictitious country, a fictitious world, who's picked up, taken, condemned to death for a crime one never discovers. He doesn't ever know what he's been condemned for. This is somewhat on the lines of the trial. It's very, 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 very frightening, very scary, but that's how it is. It's about the totalitarian state and the total powerlessness somewhere of the individual when placed in the context of such a state. And it's very frightening for that reason, because he is not his own person at all. You are a tool. You're their creature. You're the creature of the state. That's all you are. You do not exercise any power. And this is one of the statements this novel is making, because Cincinnatus has a wife who is unfaithful to him. She has adulterous relationships galore. He goes off. He's put into this fort. His jail, his cell is in a fortress where he's taken off, and where he lives next to his executioner. It's a very surreal novel. It's not realistic. It's actually written in the kind of genre we should be adopting for Pakistan, because we need that kind of enhanced perception for the kind of ugliness that pervades us, that pervades our society rather, that surrounds us. And we need a more compelling idiom than kind of the routine idiom that is normally used. And we need a Nabokovian kind of construct there to confront this extraordinary, very, very frightening reality. I don't think anybody's actually tried it. Rushdie perhaps would, because he has the artistry and the talent, but hasn't done it either. So this, anyway, what is extraordinary is it's funny, it's fun as well, because Nabokov is funny all the time, but in this kind of, it's fun in a kind of nightmarish, there's a comedy noir quality to his writing all the time. It's not fun, it's funny in a very weird kind of, it's bizarre. With this, and somewhere one gets a feeling that Cincinnatus has abdicated responsibility, that he is unable to cope. He is entirely passive. We see him dancing with his jailer. All these things are happening. Yes, it's extraordinary, but this is wonderful invention on the part of Nabokov. The statement is wonderful, because what he's saying is you've lost all power of volition. Your will is incapacitated. Sure. Look, we don't even know if the little girl is his or whose girl she is. Sorry? Yeah, well, that unreality issue is there throughout the novel anyway. Because the windows are sort of disappearing, things keep vanishing, everything vanishes at the end, as you know. But it's a very, very compelling novel, because somewhere, this was the first novel before Ben Sinister, where Nabokov actually confronts the totalitarian state, or the theocratic state, if you like, the Soviet theocratic state, which is as theocratic as any Islamic state. No different. So it's this extraordinary way in which he confronts it. He is, at the end, he's never told when he's going to die. His executioner lives next door, in fact, burrows his way into his cell. It's actually very, very entertaining. And I think what Nabokov must have felt surely was that you need to entertain to keep your reader with you. I mean, you can't write a horrible novel or a frightening novel which is sort of monochrome in being frightening, you know. You can't let it be monotonous. You have to keep breaking the tone. You've got to be altering, varying. There has to be a lot of narrative color there and diversity there, and that is there, and it's marvelously so. So, at the end of this, I mean, people haven't really been able to interpret the ending of Invitation to a Beheading. He's taken to the square where he's to be beheaded, but at the end, now people have taken this as his having gone to the other world. I don't interpret it in this way. To my way of thinking, at the end where he's taken to be beheaded, everything vanishes. The scaffold collapses. The makeup, the makeup, the mask or the beard or whatever of the executioner comes off. Things, you know, the whole thing, the whole edifice, the whole world around him collapses, and he is said to have beings, to hear voices of beings, hear the voices of beings akin to him. And it's a wonderful moment. Now, I interpret this is the way, my own personal interpretation, as meaning that somewhere power is something we, citizens, or we, the reader, whoever, confers on people. It's a theatrical phenomenon. Power has no essence. I've written this even in my book on Hamlet, that power, as experienced by Hamlet, has no essence or transcendence. I think the same is true about Nabokov's statement. This is a statement about power and about, you know, kind of seeing through the illusion of power, of letting power call its own bluff. It's a very compelling statement. We see it happening today in Egypt. We see it happening, we saw it happening in Tunisia. And it has something to, it has to do, Nabokov says, with our own minds, with the mind. It is somewhere, it's not so facile as that, but somewhere at a stretch we can say power is in the mind. We make our own monsters. We create our own states. We can rid ourselves of monstrous, unjust, totalitarian states, such as the one that Cincinnatus finds himself in. Okay, any questions on this subject? Would you like to ask some questions? Yeah. Well, since you've read the novel. No, but listen, with Nabokov, may I just suggest that with Nabokov, identity is a very tenuous affair. Mm-hmm. Even Cincinnatus is sort of half there. You know, he's not quite there. And he's talked about as producing an impression as of a kind of an opaque presence in an otherwise mutually transparent world of transparent, mutually transparent beings. He lacks in that translucence. He's dark. But it's ironic, that statement, because it's about him being caught up in this dark world. You see? Right. I'm so sorry, we won't be able to do the whole thing.
You mentioned Russian authors, and the era obviously seems to be the Soviet era in which these authors gave their writing. And
well, one author, Nabokov, in fact.
Yes.
Kafka is a Czech author.
Okay. Authors like these, I believe, they have been popularized largely due to their writings, which were anti-Soviet establishment in a way. People like Boris Pasternak, you know, the guy who wrote
Zhivago.
Yes, Dr. Zhivago, which was sort of anti-Soviet. And coming out of the Iron Curtain, these things were sort of. Would you agree with me? I mean, this is my understanding.
Yes, but there's a difference here. There's a
Okay.
difference. Zhivago is not timeless the way
Okay.
Nabokov is. Nabokov transcends space and time altogether. It's not just about the Soviet Union. It is about everywhere. It's
Okay.
not just, Zhivago is very rooted in Russia. This is rooted nowhere. There's no place, it's not a space that's knowable. There's an unknowability about the world in which, since an artist lives. It's nightmarish. It's the nightmare world I think we live in Pakistan somewhere.
Okay. I've
That's
not read.
what it's
I've
all
not
about.
read it actually.
Well, please read it.
May I make a small observation? Zhivago, you're right, probably, and to an extent you are, but do find one bit of timelessness in Zhivago, the dream gone sour. Because Dr. Zhivago had this, communistic dream or whatever it is, and that is what goes sour, and that gives it its literary quality, plus the quality of writing of...
It's
my-
much more
my
topical, it's
point-
much more rooted
But
in
when,
Russian
you come to,
society.
but when you come to Nabokov, yes, this transcends everything, because here we are talking about the state as this huge amorphous entity, power as almost well, you said it, it's huge.
What I wanted to link this with is something which the gentleman said earlier on, i.e., Pakistani authors writing to appease the Western audience, or writing about what's palatable today, like the Taliban or the 9/11, things like that.
Palatable or saleable?
Saleable, yes. Sorry. In those times, again, the Soviet Union, they were. Would you say that authors like these got Western support because they were writing about themes which were anti-Soviet? And at the same time, would you say that people who were supported by the Soviets, writers and poets, who got the Lenin Prize, they were also, actually these were just, people who were sponsored and they were working on other people's agenda rather than writing on realities. So they were, mouthpieces of superpowers. Yes,
You
please.
take this question, Salman. You take the question.
On both spectrums.
Right, no, you may have a point there, but the point I'm getting at is that if you take Nabokov, for example, please note that the particular novels to which Dr. Adrian has referred are not his best-selling novels, were not even written in America. His most popular novel out of America, for which he is best known, has nothing to do with politics. And that's Lolita.
I'm going to come to that. It has to do with...
Well, it has, yes, but in a much more oblique manner. In a much more oblique manner.
I
Not
will come to that in a minute.
in another kind of politics altogether. But in a much more oblique manner, certainly not this denunciation of totalitarianism that you find in both Invitation to a Beheading and Ben Sinister, and certainly in Kafka. Now, Kafka is another... Now, when you come to the case of Zhivago, I think there is an element of that in Pasternak, of his being given a Nobel Prize, which he was, perhaps somewhat undeservedly. He is a great writer in his own right. He was a great poet.
Salman, can you
Please.
Sorry, can we move on now because we've got very little time. I'm so sorry we weren't able to. Anyway, I would like to move on very quickly to Ben Sinister, talk briefly about it because I want to talk about Lolita, which I have something to say about.
Excuse me, staying with beheading, I'd like to give my impression, because I have read the book, that the little girl was the jailer's daughter. Is that not
Yes,
so?
yes, but
and that's why she had the free run of the place. She could go anywhere,
I don't
enter
think-
and
yeah, I
come
know,
at any time.
I agree
that
with
was
that.
my impression.
But I agree with that. But see, all this is blurred in Invitation to a Beheading.
Yes.
Identity, and if you look at the novel again, identity is a very blurred affair altogether.
Yes.
Why does Rodion, why does the jailer dance with the prisoner?
Yes.
the lawyers there and sometimes not. It's a very weird setup. The wife is in and out.
Yes.
The in-laws also turn up.
Yes.
Furniture is brought in. It's all very weird. I don't think that is so vital or important as to who they are. They are around him. What I do feel is important, if I may say so, is the fact that the woman has a couple of children, Mart, his wife, and one doesn't know whether they are his or not. It is irrelevant because anybody can be anybody's in this funny world. It has its own perverse logic.
Yes. Would you say that it has a little element of stream of consciousness? Things and people come and go at random.
Yes, indeed it does. I think that was there since Joyce anyway, and it was there to be drawn upon. Yes, entirely. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I move on to Ben Sinister very quickly because I want to talk about Lolita as well, and that's very important. Ben Sinister, I was going to read you, we don't have the time, which is so sad. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel where I'll describe what I was going to read very briefly. There's this passage at the very start where the protagonist, Krug, is looking at the world around him and all sorts of things, you know, nature and trees and houses in this slightly peculiar way, bizarre kind of way. And I understood it, and finally it hit me. At a certain point, after one statement, he comes to a point where he says, my wife has had an operation. My wife has had an unsuccessful operation, or has not had a successful operation, and she is dying. Now, it's extraordinary writing that, because a page and a half has been devoted to external phenomena, the description of external things, and I tried to understand this, and it hit me so hard. He's had recourse to, he's used a strategy of avoidance there, which is marvelous. It's about blocking out reality, which is what we all do. So it is, and it's so compelling, because the thought about the wife is one that he's been fighting against, and it comes with great pain, and you know, it is so magnificent. It is so magnificent. And later on, he bursts into tears also with that. It is just the most compelling of moments. So, but anyway, this is again about the ideological or theocratic, or, well, not theocratic, but totalitarian state, where again, you have this kind of nightmare thing going on between, he's got this, the top, it's interesting because I think it'll ring a few bells. The man who was his friend in at school and who was at the bottom of class is now running the country. And that is very interesting and ironic, and I think should ring a few bells. Anyway, so he's running the country, this chap called Paduk in Padukgrad, and this chap's, here it's a very depressing, very bleak novel. Eventually, Krug gets killed, but it's very sad. He keeps losing his family and so on. It's a very, very compelling. Please do read it, but I want to now move on to Lolita. This is vitally important because I think I'd never understood the novel before. I did not understand why such a remarkable writer should have written what was ostensibly a pornographic novel, because somewhere it can be thought of as that. A lot of people read it as that, as pure erotica. It is not that. It is not that. And we must see it in the perspective of Nabokov's earlier novels. Here again, Nabokov has done two extraordinary things. First of all, in Lolita, he's given us the female equivalent, excuse me, of Oedipus. Excuse me. It's the relationship between Humbert is akin somewhere, is like a father-daughter relationship. So he's kind of established a new equivalent to the Oedipus complex. There's this other kind of situation arising, not mother-son, but daughter-father, father-daughter. And it's very interesting because there's more to it than that. To my way of thinking, Nabokov was doing something quite extraordinary. On the face of it, he was writing a kind of spoof of the porn variety, the pornographic variety, but he was doing much more than that. That was a cover. That was a mere cover. He was, in fact, writing about the totalitarian state. Again, he was writing about the tyranny of the free totalitarian state, the tyranny of freedom. He inverted the whole thing there. And it is a magnificent assault on American society. He's used Lolita, he smuggled in Lolita to make his statement about the free world, and it's huge hypocrisy. And he was proven right, because Lolita was welcomed, it was a bestseller, and everyone went gaga over it. So he was successful in his enterprise. He was able to pull off this incredible coup. I think it's a magnificent literary coup. It's about the tyranny of the libido as well, which is part of the mystique of the free world somewhere. So it's about that as well. I'm saying it, all this very briefly. There's so much more to say, but anyway, I hope you're with me. How many of you have actually read Lolita here? Okay, fine. I hope you will now look at it in this context, because Asar Nafisi, who has written Lolita in Tehran, has not brought up this at all. She's spoken about the totalitarian mindset of Humbert Humbert, but not about the fact that Nabokov is actually taking on the totalitarian order of the United States of America. It's a very fascinating affair. Anyway, I think we've come to the end of our session. If we have any time for questions, do we have any time for 5 minutes? 5 minutes? None.